Okay, today we'll jump to policies and training again, because once you look at this, and then last week to do a security policy, not, and when we get into this thing, not an implementation plan. There's a difference between a policy and a plan. A policy basically says what you're going to do to protect the resources. An implementation plan says how you're going to do it. You might, for instance, say, we're going to have passwords, and we're going to have complex passwords, and then it would be the responsibility of the network administrator to implement that policy. We might have a policy that says when the rooms are not occupied, they'll be inaccessible. How's that? And then it would become somebody else's responsibility to implement that policy, saying that the director of education, for instance, at 1330 will make a tour of the building and ensure that all the doors to the unoccupied rooms are locked and the lights are on or the lights are off, whatever you decide the policy, that they decide the implementation plan should be. But the policy, again, says what you're going to do. The implementation plan says how you're going to do it. There's lots of policies available on the Internet. One that I really have found, I think, particularly good is the one at UC Berkeley, and you can find that by just searching Berkeley security policy. They lay out the policy and all of the supporting policies. We'll do supporting policies in the second half of the class. We'll do some of those as we go through that portion of it. So the objectives: define an organizational security policy. A security policy is the policy of the company to protect the resources, and that's it, simply put. When you do that, as you go through the whole process, the first thing you have to determine is what are the resources. We're not going to go through each of those things and do a risk analysis of those. I mean, like the doors. What we're trying to do, protect the physical resources if we lock the doors or put on burglar alarms at night and things like that. We're also protecting the data. If we say that the NOC shall be locked or occupied, I mean, there are some things you can do there, but you would just say that it would be accessible only to authorized personnel, for instance. What could you do to make it that way? One of the things I would do would be to put a door closer on the door so that when you walk out, you can't leave it open. I would put a lock on it that can only be opened with a key and can't be unlocked from the inside, so that the door always stayed locked. And that if somebody wanted in, they'd have to ask to come in or to see whoever, the network administrator, because that's where he lives, obviously. And maybe probably a cipher lock. When we talk about cipher locks, we love to put them down here where we can see them. Cipher locks you can feel. Cipher locks should be up here so that people can't see what you're doing. Shoulder surfing, and they're going to refer to that. When you type in passwords, shoulder surfing, somebody watch you type in a password. You've got to be really fast or you've got to learn how to protect it. So those things are all individual elements. And when we look at where we are, you say, well, that's not a really big deal. Maybe not a really big deal at the school. But let's say that you're working in a high security area. It can become a really big deal. That you have to have codes and badges and all sorts of things to get into those things. How much security do you need? Back to, I think we talked about day one, you also don't want to spend more on the security than the resource is worth. You don't want to spend $10,000 to protect a $1,000 computer. That's kind of silly. You just buy the, spend $10 to protect $1,000 computers or $100 to protect it or whatever else. If you're protecting $500,000 worth of computers, then it's probably worth spending the $10,000. The types of security policies, and there's going to be the overall policy and then all of the supporting policies that go along with that. Acceptable use policy, physical security policy, all of those are individual policies that support the general policy that we're going to use. And then Based on those physical security policies, we're going to lock the building up at night, la-da-da-da-da-da, on and on and on. And somebody needs to come up with a procedure of how that happens. How do you unlock the building? They've had instances here where some people have come in through the front door and set off the alarm because they presumed that somebody else was in the building and the alarm had been disabled. Only because they didn't know. But what kind of procedure? And you probably have a procedure that if that door is locked, then you go to the back door, where it's not the only place that you can set the alarm, but it's a lot more convenient because it's right there as you walk in the door, rather than having to go through another door or two or whatever to find a keypad to reset the alarm or to turn the alarm off. So how are we going to do those things? Education and training can limit the impact of social engineering. And you guys were talking. Who was telling me about Mr. Neuron, how helpful he was? Somebody was. Went over to tell you about the whole network, right? Maybe it was Sam. He's not here. Social engineering is a non-technical way of getting information. And it works. Otherwise, people wouldn't be doing it. I'm the vice president of whatever, and I need this password reset, or what is the password? They've got a couple of pretty good stories in the book about that people are pretending to be somebody else. One is a virus going around, and my first thought was it was a computer virus, but it was an illness virus. People were going home from work sick, and to call up and say, oh, whoever had to go home sick, and we have this project that's due today, and I need their password to get the document because they're the only one that has a copy of it. And eventually they gave him the password. So now you have a compromised system. Social engineering just simply means that you're a good talker. I'm not. I can never be a good social engineer. Good salesman. Can you sell yourself into believability is what we're really talking about there. These are the things, and we have had instances in this organization, I won't say at this campus, but in this organization, and they're limited, that people in high authority have gotten the email that this is, IT, and we need your credentials so that we can check something out. Hopefully you know by now that that ain't true. Well, we get those all the time. How many of you get, dear eBay customer, dear whoever customer, your account's about to expire. Click on here to do that, huh? PayPal. Oh, yeah, that's great. Those guys, PayPal, that's what I was trying to think of. Dear PayPal customer, do they ever address you as dear PayPal customer? They know who you are. They address you by your name, dear whoever, and they don't put links in the emails to go there. How can you protect yourself against those? It's pretty ugly, but what if you don't allow your email client to make the emails look pretty? You see the HTML, you see all the links, where are they going? I showed you that one earlier, I think, that I got from TD Ameritrade. Yeah, it's kind of an odd place to go, email.tdameritrade.com. You think they would do that? I really don't, but they might. I never clicked on it because when you click on those things, it also sends back a marker to whoever sent it that the email account is valid. Also, why is the default in, and I think it is the default in Outlook, that you don't download pictures? Look pretty ugly without the pictures, don't it? Why did they do that? Because there are people out there sending things that when the picture gets downloaded, oh yeah, that's a live account. The pictures don't get downloaded. They don't know that whether it's a valid account or not. So there are a number of things that they use, that counters are out there that we usually go around in order to make these things look better. Security policies, plans, and policies established by the organization ensure that users correctly implement hardware and software defenses. Talk about, we'd have an antivirus policy, an anti-malware policy, and on and on and on. Each of these areas would have supporting policies that would support the overall policies. Key policies organization is the security policy itself. And there are lots of policies at different places, are there not? I bet that bank's got a lot of policies, doesn't it? Uh-huh. Like what?
Well, there's a closet everywhere there's a switch.
There's a closet everywhere there's a switch.
It's got a key and
Key, yeah.
a swipe card.
And a swipe card to get in. Golly, why would they do that? It's just a switch. Rogue DHCP server, rogue wireless access point. What about just port mirroring? What can I do if I can get physical access? All you Cisco guys, you get physical access, you can change the password, you can get in any of those things. Just simply by restarting the device, can you not? And stopping it and going around the configuration file. Physical access, physical security, those kinds of things are a really big deal. Protecting the ports, the things that we were talking about the last time. So we want to have a security policy. It's just a written document that states how an organization plans to protect the company's information and technology assets, not the step-by-step procedures that we're going to use. Policy is kind of like an executive summary, that this is what we're going to do, and then somebody else has got to do it. That's always handy when you can say, this is what we're going to do, but I don't have to do it, isn't it? And that's a great way to do business, is you make up the rules, but somebody else has to implement the rules. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. Can serve several functions, can be an overall intention and direction, specify specific risks and how to address them, create security-aware organizational culture, help ensure that employee behavior is directed and monitored. One of the things that I do like to ask for those of you who are working in the IT area, does your employer have regular training, regular security training, to remind you not to click on not to open the attachments? Be aware of where you go. Yes, we've got a proxy server, and here's why. Or we have a filter on the firewall, and here's why.
No, they just tell you that you get fired if you go on the internet.
You get fired if you go on the internet at all. That's training. That's pretty severe training, right?
You want to say it once.
Mm-hmm. Most, many, some, and one of the things that they do, a slide later, talk about an HR policy. What are the consequences? And that's a pretty severe consequence. You go on the internet, you get fired. Straight up. Most policies that I've seen have an escalation of penalties. The first is a verbal, then a written, then maybe a suspension, and after the suspension, then a termination. What's the policy going to be when you terminate somebody? What's the IT policy going to be when you terminate somebody? Limited their account. Hopefully you've disabled their account. One of the ways that you know you don't work there anymore is when you come in the morning, you can't get on the network. Or your badge doesn't work at the door, yeah. All of those things, but those should all be in policy. How do you handle terminated employees? Some of them just go. Some of them get really nasty, obviously want to take revenge, but what's the policy? And then once you make the policy, who's going to set out the step-by-step, basically, to implement this policy? Who's going to actually do the action that you've called for in the policy itself? And they talk about balancing trust and control, and you have to do that. There are three ways, but there are three ways to do that. Trust everybody all the time. I bet the bank doesn't do that. You said they don't do that because they don't let you on the internet. Trust everybody all the time. That's really kind of a difficult thing to do. Although there are lots of companies that do that. I hear stories all the time. People come back and say, when I go in here, everybody's an administrator. Probably not the best thing to do, but it makes everything work well until somebody deletes the stuff that everybody needs to work well with. Trust no one at any time. This would be really kind of designed at a high security area, probably mostly military planning areas or secret projects. One of the things that the military does to trust no one at any time is when they do these really, really secret stuff, only a very, very, very few, like 2 or 3 real high-ranking people know everything. Everybody else knows a piece of the project, and they work on their piece of the project. And then somebody else puts it together. And honestly, that's kind of the way Microsoft does software. That's why you get 14 or 15 different ways to do one thing, because one group's working on this thing, and they've got their way of doing something. Another group's working on it, they got their way to do something. When they put it together, then you've got 4 or 5 different ways to do the same action. I don't know if that's on purpose or not. I mean, the isolation is because then nobody really has a good picture of the software until they put it together. They did Windows 7 a little bit differently, and I think it works a little bit better. It doesn't have all of the glitches. Everything's got fixed, but I don't think as many of the glitches as the prior ones did. And then the other one is trust some of the people some of the time. That's kind of what we do, isn't it? Do we trust everyone? How do we not trust everyone? User accounts. Exactly. If we trusted everyone, we wouldn't need those, would we? Then we wouldn't have to have logons. Do we trust you all of the time? Not really. And we don't trust you with all of the resources, all of the assets, all of the people all the time, which really kind of means that everybody can get to everything. Do we want to do that? Everybody to everything? I don't think so. For instance, do you want me in your home directory, just like do I want you in my home directory? You don't have anything in yours, but some people do. Deciding on the level of control for a specific policy is not always clear. Security needs to be a culture of the organization, play a major role when deciding what level of control is appropriate. And it's one of the things, and they'll talk about training and how people kind of learn later on, but security is something that people need to be reminded of. Well, in the Navy, we used to have what they call stand-downs. And what would happen in the aviation world, and Monty knows this, you have a bunch of airplane crashes, what do? They just shut it down. And then you go into 2 or 3 days of training. What are we doing wrong? And it's just, and airplanes, quit flying for reasons, and usually they're not really big reasons, like somebody forgot to put the engine in. They're usually little details that people didn't do. Security is the same way. What are the details? What little thing did we or didn't we do? What kind of access do we provide people? Why don't we just let all you guys get onto your home directories from home? Matt's experienced that, I think, with his remote desktop, haven't you? Yeah. There are risks. You actually can if you'll go through your virtual machines. Kind of has a multiple logon thing. Now, you can't get it to your desktop at home. You can't get access to your desktop at home. But if we gave all of you access through your desktops at home, what's the threat? What's the risk? You're on the network. What kind of viruses do you have? Do you have an antivirus software? Are your patches up to date? On and on and on and on and on. Now, the newer software, Server 2003 on up, and they address this in one of the chapters, but since everybody hadn't had the server classes, I didn't do the labs, but they have Microsoft's incorporated a process where the server will actually check with, and this Vista and Windows 7, and there's a client you can put on XP to check to see if it's got an antivirus software, if it's up to date, and if the patches are up to date. Yes?
Just wondering how many people have actually upgraded to 08 server.
The server, I don't know. Well, I will tell you that from my experience, the Roanoke area is not really early adopters. And I don't think a lot of people really have, because the people come in and say, and the advisory board, what should we teach, have not said, yeah, we're going to Server 2008. Advanced Auto, one of the biggest IT companies around because they have a number of things over here, have not in large scale. They were looking at and have talked about, I don't know if they're going to have a course or send some of their people to a Windows 7 course so that they can start the migration, and Chris may know, start the migration to Windows 7. I don't know if they have or not.
I have talked to Greg.
Yeah.
I guess I was just curious, if we're going to play around with one, which one should we be using to better?
Really doesn't matter a whole lot. The only significant changes, opinion, between Server 2003 and Server 2008 is the terminal services. It's a little bit better in Server 2008.
The web parts changed a little bit.
Well, some, yeah. But once you figure out where the clicks are, it's the same function.
Yeah, it's just different.
It's just like people ask Active Directory, what changed? Well, nothing really. As a matter of fact, when you do the Server 2008 course, it said there is no advantage to raising a Server 2008 domain to a Server 2008 functional level. The only thing you do is require Server 2008 servers, domain controllers, and you don't get any additional benefit than from a Server 2003. Play with them both. See what the differences are. I haven't really found a whole lot of differences, honestly. The terminal services are better. I will say the terminal services are better in Server 2008. But what's the problem with terminal services? You got to buy licenses.
Well, I was talking to somebody who, their IT guy told them to upgrade to 08, and I guess that's why I was asking.
That could be.
Because now the permissions aren't right. He's the owner of the company, can't access a lot of stuff. It's not set up yet, and he's just, I guess he's wondering why.
Shouldn't be. The 2003, the Server 2003, all the 2003 to 2008 should be a straight upgrade. Was on the one that I upgraded, and everything worked when I got done. All the permissions were the same, all the users were the same, all the passwords were the same.
So you got some bad information.
Yeah.
Some bad advice.
It's the same thing. I mean, well, are IT guys going to tell you to upgrade? Are you going to tell people to upgrade?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Heck yeah, we want the latest and the greatest. What if that server just sitting out there chugging along?
but if there's nothing wrong with it.
There's nothing wrong with it. When do businesses go into an upgrade cycle? Starts going wrong when you can't support it anymore, when the other one will do more of the things that you need to do. If you're just running a small business, go to Server 2003 to Server 2008 with the expense, honestly, I'd need some pretty good justification, I think, from the business end. What are the differences? And then there are lots of documents out there to tell you what the differences are, what's up and what's good and what's not good. And see, and Kevin's right. In IIS, and I was thinking through that, they do have now the ability to better assign management of websites.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
media services.
Yeah, media services, things like that. Terminal services really did change quite a bit.
You don't need it for that.
The application end. But if you're not using that, and I'm talking at terminal service, I'm talking about what we would call virtual applications, so that we could allow you to run a copy of Microsoft Office from your house through the terminal services and a web interface.
How does licensing work on that? Things like Photoshop and stuff like that.
I don't know. You'll have to ask the vendor. You'll have to ask the vendor. You have to have licenses. You have to have multi-user. You're supposed to have multi-user copies of those things. Yeah. But those are all licensed. The vendors are going to have to. You're going to have to get into the vendor for the licensing on those things. A little off track, huh? Attitude toward that's okay. I think all these are hopefully good discussions. I don't have all the answers to everything. There's a lot. I don't have any of the answers to most of the things, but I'll make something up. No. 2003, 2008. If you're going to upgrade with the expense, is it worth the expense? A couple of advantages that you get with 2008, if you go with a core install, your server is much more secure. But if it's not exposed, who cares? Because there's a lot of things that don't run. It's also harder to manage because there is no GUI. It's all command line. once you get the services on, you can manage it from the management tools that go on the desktop. But yeah, it's a lot more secure. But if it's not sitting out in the DMZ or on the internet, so what? If it's just sitting inside your network and you have a small business with 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 employees that you trust, back to who do you trust, how much do you trust them, same thing. Any of these are going to have the same kind of relationship, whatever business you're in. But users want to be able to get their work done without restrictive security controls, like you guys do, right? I want to be able to do my homework during the lecture period. So we have a new security policy. We just turned the website off. Pretty severe policy. But most of you are listening now. Not saying that most of you weren't before. System support personnel, ease of managing the system with tight security controls. That's us. Sure makes it a whole lot easier if people can't do stuff, doesn't it? If you don't have to worry about it. How much maintenance do you have to do to a machine that's turned off? What's the risk? The risks are pretty minimal if it's turned off and locked up. But it's also not very useful. It doesn't support the users who are trying to get their jobs done. And management just want it to be cheap, as inexpensive as possible. So the support people, the IT people, kind of get in the middle here, that you've got to support the cost of these things, because as we've said before, and I heard people saying when we were doing this stuff the other day, that IT really doesn't do anything to support the bottom line or support overhead. You can make it better. You can protect it, absolutely, all of those things, but when they say, how much did you contribute to profit? How many dollars did you contribute to profit? How many dollars does your help desk contribute to profit at the bank?
100%.
100%. You protected a lot, but how much, when they go to the accounting, the bottom line, how many dollars did you bring in? So you're kind of in a precarious position here, and yeah, you are responsible for it, and yeah, if something happens, you're in trouble. This reminds me of back to my Navy days, and Monty was an aviator, so it wouldn't mean anything to him, but I have to clean it up. But it's talking about the guy, the engineer that, you know, they won't let me blow the whistle, they won't let me drive it, but let it start to sink and see who's in trouble. It's the same thing here. We're not going to spend money. We don't want to do this. Well, back to the TJ Maxx, lost however many millions of credit cards. Why did they do that? Because somebody didn't want to spend the money to upgrade their wireless access points. Somebody made a conscious decision, a bottom line decision, and it cost them a lot of in the future, in goodwill and whatever else happens when they lose all these credit cards. So a security policy, definition of a policy, a standard, a collection of requirements that specifies a system or procedure that must be met by everyone. And we've talked about standards. Standards we talked about in Introduction to Networking, and we have standards so that when somebody goes to build a computer, we have standards so we can make all these IBM PC compatibles. Or so when we go to get on the internet, then whether you're on an IBM or a Mac or Windows, let's go to Windows, a Mac or a Linux or Sun Microsystems, we all use a standard protocol, TCP/IP, to do the connectivity with. Guidelines or suggestions. Policy is a document that outlines specific requirements or rules that must be met, but not the specific steps that must be taken to support it. That's an implementation plan. Generally has these characteristics: a consensus of judgment, communicate a consensus of judgment. Policies define appropriate behavior for users, identify what tools and procedures are needed, provide directives for human resources action, and I think we probably talked about a lot of this stuff already, may be helpful in the event that it's necessary to prosecute violators. This goes back to and I may have told you the story before, the warning. We have this warning when you log on. that you never read, right? But you say you did. You should read that because what it says in the last line is that you'll pay me $5 every time you log on to the network. And I have logs. Not really, but we have this thing. Why do we have this really long thing? And actually, Roger found that at National Security Agency or CIA or somebody in this one that they say will stand up in court. Cover you. A few years ago, several years ago now, and this is a story that I've been told is true. Somebody came into a network, hacked the network, did a lot of damage. Took him to court. Company lost the case because the little placard said, "Welcome to our network." Lawyer said he was welcome, didn't say what he couldn't do. So we need policies to specify that. A lot of that's because of court cases. What are the courts rule? How are you going to protect yourself? Exactly. How are you going to protect yourself? How are you going to protect your data? That's what we're going for with the policy. What are the steps that we're going to take? Not necessarily the individual actions, but what steps are we going to take? We're going to lock the building at night. Well, somebody else has to come up with a procedure to lock the building at night. We're going to lock the rooms when they're not occupied. Well, somebody else has got to come up with a step-by-step. How are we going to do that? You wouldn't specify that in the policy. We're going to have physical security. We're going to require passwords. And we want them to be whatever. You might, and a lot of times they get a lot more specific on passwords than might be necessary. Risk management, the first involves risk management, and this is the steps. What are we going to do? What are we trying to protect? And that's when you sit down, okay, why am I doing this? Have you ever started, you guys aren't getting old enough, you ever get into a room and say, why am I here? Why did I come in here? So when you sit down to write the policy, why am I doing this? What's the purpose of this thing? Why am I here? What we want to do, asset identification, what are we trying to protect? Do we care if we protect, let's say the old machines sitting back here in the corner that are stacked up that they use to take apart in the A+ classes? How much effort are we going to spend to protect them? What about our server over there with the quad core with the 48 gig of RAM and all those hard drives? How much effort are you going to expend to protect it? Probably more, huh? Quite a bit more. Yeah, we lock it up all the time, and we put it in a rack. And the racks really do have some purpose there because if you bolt the stuff in, it makes it harder to get out. A machine that's just sitting in the room here, how hard is it to pick up one of these machines and walk someplace with it? Not very. Will you get caught? We hope so because you're going to walk out into a camera. What kind of effort? How much is it worth? How much is the resource worth? Will we care a whole lot? We would care, but we would care a whole lot if you took one of those. I think those are probably 486s. Some of them are 386s. Or if you walked out with one of those broken laptops back there. Is that a big deal? It's kind of a pain because when you start doing a class, you don't have that particular thing to show or take apart. But how much is it really worth? Go down to Goodwill and probably buy one for $5, can you? Except I think they don't do computers. Or somebody will give you one. People are always trying to give us old stuff. They really are. I have a broken computer. Would you like it? Now, some of them, yeah, you want it. If they have some unique capabilities that you can show people, things that you've read about, this is what it actually is. But what are we going to do with those things? Threat identification. We have the asset identification. The computer's in the room. What's the threat? Sam's the threat that he's going to pick it up and walk out with it. Your laptop. Your laptop, is that an asset worth protecting? What's the threat? About everybody. If you leave it laying around, somebody walks off with it. If you do anything else, what are you going to do to protect it? Well, you're not going to leave it in the middle of Starbucks when you go to get a refill because it might walk off. Vulnerability appraisal, risk assessment, and risk mitigation. Vulnerability appraisal, how vulnerable is the resource? The risk assessment, how likely is it that somebody's going to do something? And then risk mitigation, how do we reduce the risk? Are we going to eliminate the risk? Nah. Can we shift the risk? You can do that with insurance. I mean, a car, you do that. You mitigate the risk, your liability with a car by buying insurance. Second phase is to use the information from the risk management study to create the policy, and the final phase is to review the policy for compliance. So we see what we're trying to protect, write the policy, and then we check to see if the policy is working. And then when we buy something new, what we got to do? We got to go through the whole thing again. Something changes, got to do the whole thing again. Security is something that should be ongoing. It's not something that you can put in place and say, okay, I'm done. See you in 5 years. You have to keep checking to see what's going on, and then the nice circle there. Steps in the development, follow a standard set of principles. Due care, they talk about due care and due diligence, and due care and due diligence are things that a reasonable person would do. And these are terms that really do come up in courts. Did you take due care? Did you exercise due diligence when you were doing these things? Those would be things like making backups as a network administrator. Are you making backups? Did you follow your policy, or did you just ignore your policy? We love to ignore policies. All right? Most of you are ignoring a policy today, aren't you? How many of you have your badge on? Visible. Is that a policy? Do we enforce that policy? Yeah, except occasionally when unless something bad happens. Exactly. So does it become an effective policy? What would be a good enforcement for that policy? I'm asking because I don't really know. I bet at the bank there's enforcement. If you don't wear your badge, you don't come in, because you got to have the swipe, right? That'd be the only way to really enforce it. A little scanner, barcode scanner, so you could get in the door. Then what happened when Sam forgot his? He just waited till Adam came in and walked in behind him, right? Then we have to have something to stop that, the man trap. Yeah, that's why you probably need, instead of a barcode scanner, instead of a barcode scanner, you need a chip, exactly, that has a certificate in it. How much is it worth to do that at Skyline College? Huh? Say that again?
Maybe less if you just made sure everybody had their badge on and kept the doors locked all the time.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that always has amazed me is when new classes start, they don't have their badges made yet. So the only people that don't have to have badges are the ones that you don't know who they are. Yeah? So, I mean, that's just me. I'm not yelling at anybody or anything, but that's just a policy. Who enforces it? What's the policy? If the policy has no enforcement mechanism, then it's not really a policy. And that's the other thing that has to be in these things. Due care, due diligence. You can write the most brilliant document in the world, but if it's not supported and enforced, it's pretty useless. Yeah, it says be implementable and enforceable, be concise and easy to understand. And I think the book talks about Cisco has a policy on policies. That's a good thing, isn't it? And their policy on policies is that policy should be 2 pages or less. And that really makes sense. How many people are going to read a 50-page policy? Are you going to read a 2-page policy? Probably about a page and a half of it. Is that true? That's my experience with me.
I think I'd skim it.
Skim it. The 50 page, yeah, but the 2-page policy you'll probably read. And can you make policies succinct? Can you make them compact and small? Because they're policies, they don't go through every step to do everything. Balance, protection, and productivity, and this goes back to the how are we going to do these things. And security really does become a balancing act, because anytime you make a resource available, there's a risk. How much risk are you willing to accept? How much are you willing to pay to mitigate those risks? Because we're never going to make the risk go away once we made the stuff available. Some guidelines notify users in advance that we're going to have a new security policy. Provide a sample of people affected by the policy with the opportunity to review and comment on the policy. This is something that I think that a lot of places don't do very well. We know how to do this. We're the technical experts, so we're going to write a policy. But how does it impact the user that is going to be affected by it? They should be in this policy process also. And does it work? Once you do something, does it work? How is it going to impact people? Give all users at least 2 weeks to review and comment prior to deployment. Allow users the authority to carry out their responsibilities in any given policy. And I think that ties back into the provide a sample to the people affected and let them comment on it. Is it going to slow down production? Is it going to prevent production? What's it going to do for us? The umbrella term with sub-policies. I'm trying to do two words at the same time. This is a list that's in the book, and there are lots of these lists of the sub-policies that support the overall policy. Acceptable use policy, physical security policy, email policy, email forwarding policy, antivirus policy, malware policy, not all of them are on here, router security policy, extranet policy, email policy, email retention policy. Email retention policy, how long are you going to keep the emails? How long do you need them? If you're being sued, you're going to keep them until the lawsuit's over, because that's one of the responsibilities that you have. That's why network administrators generally not going to let you use POP3, because POP3 takes the email away. You have a legal responsibility if your company's sued that no emails are destroyed. Well, how are you going to keep copies of them unless you've got them? That's why businesses, my email, I can have it here using IMAP, which leaves the emails on the server, or I can access them through the web interface, and that's it. And once you delete emails, do they really go away? You got to delete them out of the deleted items. And then if you go through the web interface, you can recover the deleted items until you delete them again. Kind of interesting, isn't it? This is just a list of those things. When you start doing policies, SANS.org, and there's a link on the Moodle page, has a lot of templates. Actually, they have a template probably to cover any policy that you would want to do. It goes on and on and on and on and on, which is the basic structure that you can use to write your policy, and then put your company name in and all the specifics that you need. It's got all of the really clever words that you need. I'm because I want to get into the layer 2 stuff, configuration. I kind of like read these things. Acceptable use policy, what you can and can't do, and they go through some of the specific policies in the book. Human resource, we've kind of talked about that. What's going to happen if somebody violates the policy. Due process, creating all accused persons in an equal fashion, probably at the bank. Doesn't matter who's on the internet, they're going to get fired. Is that right? Due process. What is your due process? What's your policy? Is it a one and done, or is it an escalation of severity in the enforcement phase of it? Due diligence, any investigation into suspicious employee contact will examine all material facts. Lots of people get suspected of things. Did they actually do it? That may or may not be the case. Password management complexity policy. And this is one that we can really jump on because we kind of know how to do that, right? We just go in and check complexity policy in Microsoft server, in our server. Also specify what makes up a strong password, what's a good password, what's a not a good password. A lot of people don't know. What does make a good password?
Variety and length.
Variety and length. Length up to a point. Why do I say length up to a point?
Because if it's like 50 characters,
You forget? Actually, most operating systems truncate them.
how much?
Now, like about 12 characters maybe.
What? I think it's bullshit.
Actually, how many?
I believe Windows 7 Vista is truncated
16? Yeah, they're all a little different.
Yeah.
But most of them truncated. What else would make a good password?
I use special characters.
Use special characters. Special characters, and if you can find it anymore, cracking software. Huh?
I used it last night.
You used it last night. If you put special characters in, I've seen those things go from like we're going to take, 2 weeks or 2 months or 3 months to go to 100 years to crack a password if you use special characters.
It depends on which one you have. If you pay the money for the 7
You're talking about off crack.
Right.
I'm talking about loft crack.
Oh, loft crack?
Loft crack, yeah. Off crack doesn't come with a special character one. The free one doesn't, yeah.
Right.
Doesn't come with the rainbow table.
So there's a new one, loft.
No, loft crack is the old one. Off crack is the new one.
So, but I can download loft crack?
If you can find it, it comes and it goes. It's one of those that you get these things out there really cool, recovery softwares, they advertise them, and somebody buys it and they take it off the market because they feel threatened by it. And then it comes back, and then it goes away and it comes back.
They said they would crack a password up to 13 characters?
Off crack.
Yeah, but I had a 12-character password, and they couldn't even find it. It said failed.
Is that right? Yeah.
So I changed it to it was like 10 or 11.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
cracked.
Yeah. Off crack, OPH crack, bootable uses rainbow tables to do the password recovery. And it's one that, when we talk about security, it would become a configuration issue because what do you got to do in order to make off crack work, Chris?
Have access to the CD-ROM.
You got to boot it, right?
You got to boot it.
Well, if we don't allow bootable CDs,
And you're done.
then you're done. Yes.
You say some systems can't use special character codes because the system messed with it when it reads it? You said I get one of the server classes?
Don't think so. I may have, but I don't think I said that. I say lots of
can't use
things.
the special characters because that's the system they use.
I don't think so. I've never had any issues with Windows using special characters. And I don't think any of the Linux people have ever had any issues with special characters with Linux. One of the things that John O'Brien was trying to do and found out, you can actually use ASCII characters in a password, which would really drive it crazy.
Some places won't allow you to use special characters.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. There are some places that I go on the internet when I put it in, I try to put special characters in it, and they're just using simple passwords.
You also put like
That's the way they've got theirs configured.
put like a German letter in there, and that'll really screw
Well, not really, because, and when they talk about don't use words in any language. What LoftCrack does is uses what it calls a hybrid cracking protocol. It'll first go through and see if any portion of the password is a word. And it will crack that pretty quickly. Dictionary attacks are really quick. We'll do those next week with the Can't-Enable one, I think, is the one that does the password cracking. It's a pretty simple password, but just to demonstrate what happens. And then after it finds the word part, it goes through and uses a brute force to crack the rest of it.
What about a German, like OnCrack, you got downloaded 7.5 gigabyte.
Yeah, yeah.
To be able to find out if you have even one German character.
Yeah. That's because you got the English version of that rainbow table. There are some places online that I was looking the other day when we were looking at the Can't-Enable stuff with the hashes that do online cracking. You have to pay for them. One of them said it was free. I clicked on it, it wasn't. I was going to try it out. But once you get the hash, then you have to have something to do the cracking with it.
It was called loft crack?
Loft crack, L-O-P-H-T. Yeah. Weak passwords, fewer than 12 characters. Sam's been reading the chapter. Passwords found in the dictionary, English or foreign, and when you do the dictionaries, you get your own word list. Cain and Abel has a word list. It's not a real complex word list, but it's one that's there. You can add stuff to it. You could add foreign words to it. Those are things that actually can be found on the internet. There are word lists for the dictionary attacks. What it does is just goes through the dictionary and compares it with the password that's there with the hash. Common usage words, family names, pets, birthdays, those sorts of things. Word or number patterns, 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. The smarter ones will pick those up. Any of the above spelled backward or preceded or followed by a digit. Of course, race card would be good, right? The race card's the same spell forward and backward. Huh?
What's the word for stuff like that?
I don't know.
There's a word. Palindrome?
Palindrome? Is it palindrome?
Palindrome.
Okay, so strong passwords, upper and lowercase characters, because uppercase and lowercase characters are different. Special characters we've talked about, 12 alphanumerics, are not a word in any language, are not based on personal information, your name, username, whatever else, that are easily identifiable with you. Personally identifiable information, policy, and this is what we're normally going to hear called privacy policy. And you can read this, it's in the book. But personally identifiable information, what are we going to do with that? What if somebody what if you give somebody your email address? What are they going to do with it? Personally identifiable information. They go into a large discussion about Social Security numbers, which Virginia obviously did away with on the driver's licenses years ago. But Uncle Sam hadn't done that. IRS still uses. We have put on your tax return. Social Security number. The thing that clearly states on the card shall not be used for identification. Social Security uses, they probably would use Social Security number, right?
Social Security is not supposed to be used for identification.
That's what it says on my card. Shall not be used for identification. Who else uses it for identification? Uncle Sam, right? U.S. military. They've taken some steps, except on the retired ID cards, to take it off and put it in the, a lot of them are using a readable strip, which also has some medical records on it. Becomes another security issue. But the retirees, mine's still on the front. When my wife had to go get one, they changed it. I said, oh, I'll get a new ID card if they change the location of the Social Security number, but they haven't. Still right there on the front. So how are we going to do these things? A service level agreement is an agreement that the company has with an internet service provider. What's the bandwidth going to be? What's the guaranteed uptime? How much is it going to cost? Those kinds of things. What kind of connection are you going to have? And those, they get pretty specific. These are just, this is a table with the examples of what might be in that service level agreement. Designed to produce standardized, so a policy, standardized framework, creation, the high, medium, and the low, that goes back to the table that was just there. Change management policy. What are we talking about change management? Why do we need to manage change? Change just happens, doesn't it? What did we change on the computer? How do users request changes? I need this piece of software. We had a group of instructors here who absolutely positively without a doubt, no doubt in anybody's mind, had to be administrators on their computer so that they could install this software, so that they could try it out, so that they could effectively teach their classes. And you know what else we found out that they were really good at installing? Viruses and malware, spyware. Did they absolutely positively need to do that? So they install 2 pieces of software. How hard is it for the network administrator to go to one computer and install a piece of software? With the numbers that we have, it's not really all that difficult. Once they took that administrative authority away, golly, the incidences of viri decreased significantly. What do they need to do in change management? How do you request change management? How do you justify the changes that need to be made? The other thing that I think should go in here, opinion again, is the changes that you make, upgrades to the machines. As you install patches, as you install hot fixes, document all of those things, because other changes that really do need to be made. Ethics policy, they go into a pretty good discussion, at least a discussion, and they put it back to the thing that we just had with the causes of the market crash, the morals and people just trying to make money regardless of the cost. An ethics policy is something that a lot of companies do have. What kinds of things are you allowed to do and not do, reflective of the company. The government has a, right? The government has, I never had to do it because I wasn't important enough, but all these people that are in important positions, there is an ethics. They have to sign a statement that they haven't done this or they won't do this or they whatever and how much money they made and that it was all from legitimate sources, those kinds of things. What kind of ethics policy might you have? And I don't think that we're going to get involved, we at the network level are going to get involved with the ethics policy. It's here because it's one of the policies that you can have. Actually might, because code of conduct, you as a network administrator, if you don't have any ethics, you're probably not going to have a job very long, are you? Because what do you have access to? Everything. Everything. It's all ones and zeros. It's not just ones and zeros that you have access to. You have access to documents that you can read. So it's really one of those things, just because you can get to it doesn't necessarily mean that you should. We really get into those things. Education and training. We talk about continuous training, and then we talk about a little bit that we've already talked about, social engineering. Social engineering is where you try to manipulate somebody to do something for your advantage. To put your check into my checking account.
What was your password?
To put your well, you can start out with, what is kind of a simple thing to start out with? If you were going to sit down and do a Cain and Abel, say, hey Chris, what's the IP address of your machine? What's the IP address of your machine? Could be something as simple as that, couldn't it? We're here from IT and we're going to help you. What's your username and password? What's the name of your computer? Yeah. What's your IP address? What kind of things are we going to do? So generally, though, we kind of think about it as, your PayPal account, there's something wrong with it. Click on here to fix it. Like Chris was saying earlier. You get those all the time too, don't you? All the time. The ones I love are the ones I get from the banks that I've never heard of or don't have an account with, that my account's about to expire or get locked out or something. And some of them are pretty convincing. You can look at this thing prior to 46, the traits of the individuals, and we have a pretty big cross-section, I think, probably in this class. And everybody has a little bit different way of learning. And what we try to do is give a lot of different ways to do it. What, is this you? Pragmatic, globally concerned, computer literate, media savvy, do what want to do.
I'm 65 to 81.
65 to 81, self-reliant, distrustful of institutions, adaptive to technology. I won't say where I am.
I don't think he's on this thing.
I'm on that table.
No.
You have to be. One of them was prior to 1946, which I'm not in. Different learning styles, visual learners, auditory learners, and kinesthetic. Kinesthetic is touch, do. And we think that most of the people that come here are kinesthetic learners, and that's why we really devote a lot of time, hopefully a lot of time, to labs instead of to lecture. Auditory listening, visual learners seeing, that's what this is about, auditory hearing, and then kinesthetic doing. So we provide, hopefully, each of those different areas. And some people by reading, too. That's when they don't have it. Huh?
I always wonder why they never had well, I guess it's including visual, so we read the book and understand.
Well, that's part of it, and also presenting slides and pictures. And the pictures on the website, the representations of the different processes in the course page that we have there. Reducing the risk of social engineering, tricking or deceiving, phishing. We've talked about, you've all seen phishing, websites that look good, emails that look good, links that look good. Check them out. And what you've got to do is educate the people to check them out. They had this one. I didn't really think this one looked particularly good personally. It's in the book also. The ones that I get have all the cool logo stuff and the pictures and all of those other things. And they're pretty easy to find, aren't they? Can you find the logos for most of these companies?
I can steal a whole website.
You can steal a whole website. I can too. There are lots of things out there that will allow you to steal a whole website. But what these guys want is just to look good. Just go to Google Images and look for things like that. You can find an awful lot of stuff there, huh? And logos. Variations in phishing, spear phishing, where they target specific users, farming, and then Google phishing. Ways to recognize phishing, deceptive web links with the fake sender's email address. This is the one I like, fake sender's email address. Does anybody else get spam from themselves? Used to?
Yes.
I get spam from myself here quite frequently. Somebody just modifies the header information. You can say it's from anybody you want to, can't you? You can even do that in the client. Generic greeting, pop-up boxes and attachments, and most of and I've never gotten one from a legitimate site that said, click here to do this. What they'll say is, go to our website and check it out and do those things. One of the other things that probably can help you with those websites, and I'm going to go back to OpenDNS because they work on those. They work on blocks for phishing sites. And there is a category in there if you want to do a very limited blocking, there's a category in there for phishing sites and malware sites that you can block. You can protect yourself from yourself that way. Oh yeah, they talk about phishing and compare it, and this is actually pretty good. Compare an email, think of an email as a postcard. And one of the things to remember about a postcard is anybody can read it. Mailman certainly can read it when he delivers it. You can only read it, which means that it doesn't have anything enclosed. Unless somebody's told you they're going to send you an enclosure, you may want to be suspicious of that. Particularly since Windows does us such a favor by blocking the well-known extensions. So that I could make a document that was something like, hacku.doc.exe, and it would only show you that, hacku.doc, because it hides the real extension. Has nothing else with it. No envelope, nothing else in it, no attachments, no anything else. But think of an email as a postcard. And in fact, emails can be read by anybody, can see them. Email by default is a text. That's all it is, just a text document. We'll get into encrypting email in one of the chapters. I've got a lab for you to do with that, where you send an encrypted email using PGP, which is free, even though they imply that it's not. The other one's dumpster diving. Somebody goes into the dumpster to take stuff out, or just pick stuff up off the side of the street. And you've seen, they just have a couple of, I used to have, they're not showing them anymore, a couple of ads where people set stuff out on the sidewalk to be recycled, and people picking up the banking, checking statements and things like that. Well, what goes into the dumpster? A lot of companies throw away a lot of information that can be useful whenever some standalone and someone is put together with other things. Most of you probably don't remember when the embassy got taken over in Tehran. They shredded stuff. You know what the Iranians did? They took that shred, put it back together. It wasn't a crosscut shredder, it was a strip shredder. So how much effort do you need to make to get rid of stuff? Shoulder surfing is watching somebody, and computer hoaxes these emails that say, oh, the world's going to end, forward this to everybody in your address list. They do this or do that or do whatever. My favorite, well, one of my favorites, because somebody sent me to that today, said, I'm going to be really rich after I get all this money back from all these people that are going to send me money for participating in their surveys or whatever else. You know, get this one that says Microsoft will pay you whatever for doing this. They ain't going to do it. But computer hoaxes. The computer hoax was one of the first viral attacks, virus attacks years ago. It was a Christmas Day attack or Christmas vacation attack at IBM, where they had one of these hoaxes. Send this to everybody that you know, and they crashed the email server by doing that. So it is spam. It costs money. Computer hoaxes. It can also cause issues. Delete this file, which happens to be one that you really need. Windows, fortunately, won't let you delete a lot of that stuff. But what goes on with these things? So what's a policy? Now that we've done all this wandering around, what does a policy do for you? What's the objective of a policy? Do I have to start over? Guidelines. Huh? Get everybody on the same page. What's going on? What's the threat? What are we trying to protect? How are we going to protect it? CYA. That's part of it. Do you want to be the one that gets the $50,000 phone? You got to be able to show that you had took due care and due diligence, that you had a policy and that you actually enforced the policy. One of the things, and I'll pick on Monty again because I know he was in the Navy, and the Air Force probably did the same thing. Well, when somebody came to inspect you, what was the first thing that they did? You don't know, do you? They asked for your local instructions, your local policies, and then they just checked to see if you followed it. If you got a policy, follow it. If you're not following a policy, do away with it. Because just like the example that I used with the badges, what good's that policy? What does it really do? You ever want to ask your employer to please make you a list of important policies? Since there are so many of them. But only have the ones that you're going to enforce. That's me. Questions? Going once, going twice. Okay.